The sun hung low in the sky, washing the streets of Enugu in a warm, golden hue. The scent of roasted corn drifted through the air, mixed with the sharp edge of red dust kicked up by passing Okadas and buses honking their way through the city's late afternoon bustle. Chinaza, her scarf tied neatly above her forehead and a faded blue handbag tucked under her arm, walked along the roadside market. The chatter of traders and customers weaved around her like a living tapestry. She wasn't in a hurry, but her mind was heavy, weighed down with the uncertainties that had settled into her life like unwelcome visitors. She had recently lost her job at the tailor's shop where she'd worked for years. The shop closed down without warning, and the owner, a gentle old woman with more debts than dresses, had left town quietly. Since then, Chinaza had been struggling to make sense of what to do next. The little savings she had were thinning, and her younger brother was still in school, depending on her. As she passed by a junction near coal camp, her eyes caught sight of a man sitting quietly beneath a small mango tree. He was thin, his clothes faded and patched in many places. A dark pair of glasses shielded his eyes, but the long cane by his side told a deeper story. He was blind. A torn hat lay before him on the ground, containing only a few coins and a single wrapper of groundnut that looked more like pity than kindness. Most people passed him by without a glance. A few turned their faces away as if the man's presence burdened them. Chinaza slowed her steps, unsure why she felt something pull her toward him. There was no dramatic voice in her head, no thunder from the skies, just a quiet, insistent nudge in her spirit. She stopped in front of him. For a few seconds, she simply looked at him. He didn't move. His face was turned slightly upward, peaceful, almost expectant. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice soft. "Ah, good evening, my daughter," he replied, nodding slowly. There was warmth in his tone, a sort of ancient kindness that felt out of place amidst the city's harshness. Chinaza reached into her handbag. There wasn't much in it, just enough for a bus ride and a small plate of rice later, but she drew out some folded notes and gently placed them in the hat. "Take this," she said. "It's not much, but—" "You've already given more than you know," the man interrupted. She blinked. "I don't understand." He chuckled lightly, a sound like wind brushing over leaves. "Most don't. Sit with me for a while." Something in his voice made her obey without question. She sat beside him under the mango tree, brushing dust off her wrapper as she did. They didn't talk much at first. The sounds of the city pulsed around them, shouting traders, laughing children, music blaring from a passing kiki. But beneath it all was a strange silence between them, like a shared understanding that didn't need words. After a while, Chinaza spoke. "You've been here long." "Long enough," he said. "Long enough to see things, even without eyes." She glanced at him. "You see things?" "Yes," he smiled. "Things most people don't. Like you. You're carrying burdens too big for your shoulders, but you carry them anyway." Chinaza felt her throat tighten. She looked away quickly, blinking back the sting in her eyes. "Life doesn't wait for you to be ready," she whispered. "No, it doesn't," he agreed. "But sometimes help comes when you're not looking for it." There was a pause. The man turned his face toward her, and though he couldn't see her, it felt like his gaze went deeper than most. "You helped me without knowing who I am," he said quietly. She frowned. "You're a man in need. That's all I needed to know. Maybe. Or maybe, you've always known how to see what others overlook." Chinaza didn't know how to respond. She just sat there, heart beating a little faster, unsure if this man was simply wise, or something more. "Do you believe in angels?" he asked suddenly. She gave a short laugh. "I believe in survival. Angels don't come to places like this." He turned his face up to the sky. "That's where you're wrong. Angels are always where they're most needed. Sometimes we just don't know what they look like." She watched him in silence, unsure what to make of his words. The sun was dipping lower now, casting long shadows across the road. A wind picked up, rustling leaves in the trees and carrying with it the distant sound of church bells. Chinaza shivered slightly, but not from cold. There was something unspoken in the air, something just on the edge of understanding. She glanced at the man again, uneasy yet oddly comforted. The way he sat, so calm, so rooted, reminded her of her grandfather, who used to say that the world spoke in whispers if only one would learn to listen. This man, whoever he was, seemed to know those whispers by name. "You speak like someone who knows more than he says," she said, half teasing, half curious. "I say what is needed," he replied, "not what is easy." There was a moment of silence between them again, but it no longer felt awkward. It felt necessary. Like the pause in a song before the melody changes. From across the road, a small boy ran toward them, chasing a burst tire that rolled down the street like a mischievous ghost. His mother yelled after him, but he paid no mind. The boy's laughter echoed briefly, sharp and bright. The blind man tilted his head. "There's still beauty, even in noise," he murmured. Chinaza sighed. "Sometimes it's hard to see beauty when all you feel is the weight of not knowing what tomorrow holds." "Tomorrow has never been promised," he said gently. "Yet we live like we own it." She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him about the sleepless nights, the fear of rent, the gnawing hunger that didn't just live in her belly, but in her heart. But something stopped her. It wasn't just his words, it was the way he said them. As though he had walked through her life before she ever took her first step. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. He nodded. "Why are you really here?" He smiled faintly. "To wait." "For what?" "For moments like this." Chinaza opened her mouth, then closed it again. The air around them felt charged, like the pause before rainfall. She rubbed her hands together and looked away, suddenly unsure of herself. "I don't know why I sat with you," she said quietly. "But you did. And that choice, Chinaza, will shape more than just this day." Her head snapped toward him. How do you know my name?" He turned his face slightly, as if listening to something in the distance. "I know a lot more than just your name." The skin on her arms prickled, and she stood up quickly, her heart thudding. The world around her didn't feel the same anymore. The voices of the market seemed muffled, distant, like background noise. "Who are you?" she whispered, taking a step back. The man simply smiled, not rising from his seat. "Don't be afraid. You have always been protected, even in silence. Even when you thought you were alone." A gust of wind passed between them, strong enough to make her scarf flutter. The mango tree above them rustled, and something, a fruit maybe, or a leaf, fell near the beggar's foot. But he didn't flinch. Chinaza looked around. Nobody else seemed to notice. The man in front of her sat calmly, hands folded on his lap, blind eyes hidden behind dark lenses, his face unchanging. But in her chest, something cracked open. A warmth bloomed, subtle but powerful. Like sunlight pressing gently against a cold window pane. She took a deep breath, stepped forward again, and slowly sat beside him once more. "Then, if you know so much," she said, not quite smiling, "tell me." But he was no longer there. The spot under the mango tree where the man had sat was empty. No cane. No torn hat. Not even a dent in the dust where his legs had stretched. Just silence, and the slow, swaying branches of the tree above, dancing gently in a wind that seemed to whisper her name. Chinaza froze. She blinked. Looked left, then right. People passed, carrying their bags, shouting at conductors, hawking wares, laughing, cursing. Life carried on as if nothing had happened. But her heart was pounding, her breath caught somewhere between wonder and fear. She walked back slowly to the mango tree, her eyes scanning the ground. Nothing. It was as though he'd never been there at all. As though she'd imagined the entire thing. But she hadn't. She could still feel the weight of his hand in hers. Still hear the warmth in his voice. Still see the curve of his smile and the quiet power that clung to his presence like the scent of rain on dry soil. Then she noticed something. Just beneath where the hat had been, tucked between the roots of the mango tree, was a small white feather. She bent down, picked it up carefully. It was soft. Light as breath. It shimmered slightly in the sunlight, as though kissed by something not entirely of this world. She turned it over in her hand, her mind racing through every tale she'd heard in her childhood, her grandmother's stories of spirit beings who walked among humans, stories the grown-ups now dismissed as fantasy. But now, those stories didn't feel so far away. She held the feather to her chest, eyes closed. Maybe he wasn't just a beggar. Maybe he wasn't even a man, not in the way she understood. Her legs moved before she made the decision. She needed to tell someone, needed to share this with a soul who might understand. But as she walked, the chaos of the day returned, the roaring danfos, the impatient calls of sellers, the pulsing movement of life. And with it came a question, soft but persistent. Would anyone believe her? Chinaza wasn't sure. But belief wasn't the gift she'd been given today. No, what she'd received was something rarer, something precious. Hope. That evening, when she returned to her small one-room apartment, the sun had dipped completely below the horizon, and the stars above were poking their way through the indigo sky. The city was quieter now. Still restless, but softer. Slower. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and lit the small lantern that sat beside her mat. Her brother was out, probably still at the library or with friends. The room was still and familiar. But it no longer felt empty. Chinaza knelt beside her low table and carefully set the feather down. She didn't have many things, no fancy decorations or framed pictures. But she knew this feather, this tiny, beautiful thing, was the most valuable item in her home now. That night, as she lay on her mat, she didn't pray for money. She didn't cry for answers. She did. She simply whispered, "Thank you." And she slept. Peacefully. Like someone who, for the first time in a long while, wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Morning came gently, with the soft rustle of leaves outside her window and the far-off sound of a rooster greeting the sun. Chinaza stirred, eyes still closed, body wrapped in a warmth that wasn't just from her wrapper. It was the warmth of calm. Of something inside her finally settling. When she opened her eyes, the feather was still there on the table, untouched. And with it, something new. A small slip of paper, yellowed at the edges, folded once. She hadn't placed it there. Heart quickening, she sat up slowly, reached for the paper, and unfolded it with care. On it, written in a firm, elegant hand, was a short message. When the time comes, you will remember this moment, not as a miracle, but as a seed. No signature. No explanation. She stared at the note, lips slightly parted. The room was quiet. Only the ticking of her old wall clock filled the silence. A seed. That word echoed in her mind all morning. She kept the note and the feather wrapped together in an old piece of Ankara cloth and tucked them in the deepest corner of her bag. Not to hide them, but to keep them close, like a secret that needed to grow in the dark before it could bloom. That day, something in Chinaza shifted. She didn't suddenly become rich. The job offers didn't come pouring in. The city didn't open its arms and say, "Welcome back." No. The world remained what it was, hard, unpredictable, loud. But she moved through it differently. At the market, when a woman with too many children and too few naira stood arguing with a seller, Chinaza stepped forward and quietly covered the rest of her payment. When she passed a roadside mechanic sweating under the weight of a broken-down bus, she offered him her cold bottle of water. When a young girl stumbled on the sidewalk and scraped her knee, Chinaza knelt beside her, tore a piece of her wrapper, and made a soft bandage. Each act was small. But each felt guided. And each time she helped someone, she saw a glimmer, just a flicker, of the men beneath the mango tree. Sometimes in a stranger's smile. Sometimes in a warm breeze that passed at just the right moment. Sometimes in her own reflection, where something new had taken root behind her eyes. Weeks passed. Then a month. And one evening, just as the harmattan began to sweep its dry fingers over the city, she got a call. A woman from a community center in Nsukka was looking for someone to teach young girls how to sew and mend clothes. Chinaza's name had come up. She didn't even remember applying. "You were recommended," the woman said warmly. "Someone said you have a good heart." Chinaza blinked, holding the phone tightly. "Who?" There was a pause on the line. Then, the woman chuckled softly. "He didn't leave a name." She accepted the job. It paid modestly, but it came with a small space, a clean bed, and enough for transport and food. More than that, it came with purpose. Every girl she taught reminded her of herself, of struggle, of resilience, of the quiet hope that someone, somewhere, still believed in them. And on days when doubt crept in, when money felt too tight or the path too steep, Chinaza would reach into her bag and touch the feather wrapped in ankara. She never took it out in public. She didn't need to. Its presence alone reminded her, angels didn't always wear wings. Sometimes they wore dust-covered clothes, sat under mango trees, and saw with eyes that needed no light. She had been touched by something eternal. And unknowingly, she had touched it back. Years passed like pages turned gently by a quiet breeze. Chinaza grew into her purpose the way roots grow into fertile soil, steadily, without fanfare. Her work at the community center blossomed beyond just sewing. She became a sister to some, a mother to others, and a pillar to many. The girls she trained went on to start small businesses, mend their families' clothes, and in their own way, stitch their lives back together. She never forgot the men under the mango tree. Sometimes she would return to that old junction in Enugu, usually in the early evenings when the light was low and golden, just as it had been that day. She would stand quietly by the tree, watching the people go by. She never saw him again, not once. But she always left with the same quiet peace in her chest. As if he'd never really left. One particular afternoon, after hosting a workshop for a group of young women from nearby villages, Chinaza stayed back alone to clean up. The sewing machine sat silent, their wheels still glinting in the soft light. She walked slowly around the room, adjusting chairs, gathering loose thread. She reached into her bag and took out the old ankara bundle. The fabric was a little worn now, soft from years of being carried. She unfolded it gently, revealing the feather, still white, still whole. The paper, too, though slightly crinkled, still bore the same message. When the time comes, you will remember this moment, not as a miracle, but as a seed. Moral lesson. A single act of kindness, no matter how small, can plant seeds that grow into powerful change, not just in others, but within ourselves. Sometimes, the help we give is guided by unseen hands, and in giving, we discover our true purpose. We have gotten to the end of this story. Kindly like, subscribe and comment if you truly believe in angels,